Teenagers identifying themselves as Twizzy have been causing chaos at Gauteng malls, leaving scores calling on police for their arrests. On the weekend, hordes of teenagers belonging to the TikTok challenge group stormed the Mall of Africa in Johannesburg. The challenge stipulates that teenagers storm a mall and cause mayhem for mall customers. Let's take a look now and speak to, before we even unpack this particular story. Either high, they've been smoking weed, others are believed to have been drinking. At the same time, there does look to be some fighting going on here. So a lot of questions about what exactly is going on. Let's speak to social media legal consultant Lerato Ntwampe, who joins us live now. Lerato, thank you so much for your time. What are we seeing unfold before our eyes?
Good evening, Bongiwe. I think you've explained it. It's basically a group of teenagers just storming a mall and creating chaos. It is one of the notorious TikTok challenges that we see on a regular. I mean, the previous one was the school challenge, where kids were bringing unconventional items to school, and that also got out of hand, as well as the school challenge that got out of hand in KZN last year as well, also pertaining to a lot of teenage girls. So I think it's a trend that teenagers just get on, and they don't really understand the legal implications that may follow, due to their behavior, especially at malls, which is, a private property. Malls could obviously sue them for damage to property. They could be criminally charged if they're 14 years old, 14 years and older. They have full legal capacity from 14. So it is quite important that these kids understand that what they're doing could literally ruin their future if they're not careful.
And of course, some of them are watching us tonight, as we're having this particular conversation. Let's take a step back and think about the parents here. If a child then is under the age of 14, can the parent also then have to come into the picture in terms of legalities, or how does that work? Because we're talking about them being 14 and above, who can then maybe have a criminal record.
So usually from 12 to 14, they have a presumed criminal liability. So It means that depending on the child, they will obviously look at whether the child understands what's wrong or right? So during those ages, 12 to 14, presumed criminal liability, but from 14, they have full criminal liability. So they can be charged, they can be prosecuted, they can also be sued civilly for their behavior. So I think parents just need to have conversations with their children. Children under the age of 13 shouldn't be on TikTok anyway, in terms of their own policies that they have. They are not allowed to be on TikTok. The age restriction for TikTok is 13 years old and older. And also they have their own little TikTok, which is apparently different. I don't really believe that, but apparently that's the case. And also they need to be aware that as soon as they sign in or sign up for TikTok, there are community standards that they actually have to adhere to, which also prohibit this dangerous acts and challenges, because we've seen a rise of these dangerous TikTok challenges in other countries as well, which has actually even led to deaths. We remember the blackout challenge, where kids were being forced or strangling themselves, leading them to be unconscious. 2 kids died in that scenario. We may also remember the crates challenge, where kids were putting up milk challenges and getting on top of those. So they can lead to death. It is dangerous. They can also be suspended from these social media platforms. But I think what's important is that they must realize that the ramifications will follow them. They might be suspended from their schools, because essentially what they're creating is evidence. All of this is trending on social media. Their schools, they might have signed, social media policies, code of conduct at schools. And if schools can also, suspend them if they see that, some of their kids are involved. Some of them might be wearing uniform, but in this specific case, this Twizzy challenge, the mandate is to dress in black and wear shades and all of that. But because kids have been streaming, and I've seen that it's about 46.8 million views, this hashtag on TikTok at the moment.
So, Lerato, you bring the element of schools. So if they sign this social media policy at schools and then they are seen outside of the school doing something that is considered to be, part of these craze that we've seen, and it's, as you say, it comes with legal ramifications. Can the argument hold that I was not at school, it was not during school hours, I was actually in a different place, so you cannot suspend me? Can that argument hold?
It depends on what the school, the social media policy says. So some schools are very strict, especially when their kids are wearing school uniform. But there are those kids that will be identifiable because they might be, head girl or prefects or, some sort of leadership that they're holding at school. So even if they're outside of school, they may face some sort of consequences or disciplinary hearings, especially if they are easily recognizable. Some schools have ambassadors for their schools, and those people are usually visible and popular. So sometimes it may lead that, but, depending on what the school policy says and the code of conduct. But if they're not in school uniform, they might be able to get away with it. But in terms of the law, they can easily be held liable, especially with the evidence that is presented on these social media platforms.
So some of the parents will say that for them it's difficult to police their children on a regular when it comes to, the social media usage, because sometimes a child is on the phone and they're pretending to be doing one thing, and on the other end they're doing something else. And as you say, they're not supposed to be on TikTok if they are older than they are younger than 13 years old. So how then do parents begin to control the social media access of these children? Is there any way that you can advise a parent watching tonight?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that kids don't have a right to a smartphone. It's a privilege, and it's a privilege that needs to come with consequences, and it has to come with rules. Kids need to know that, there's a specific time that they're allowed on their phones. Parents should have those strict times. There are apps where parents can actually check the screen time of the kids, and making sure that they only have a certain time on, the phones. They can also have, strict rules that you can only be on your phone at this certain time. You're not allowed to have certain people on your social media. I always also advise parents to follow their kids on social media, because they need to see who their kids are following, what they're doing on social media. And they also need to be aware that kids also have what they call catfish social media platforms, where obviously now they do all the crazy there, but then the parent is following a clean social media where they keep a clean reputation. So they also need to be aware that kids also do have these platforms where they participate in challenges such as this, which could also pose such risks for them, potentially leading to death, or even being criminally liable, which totally ruins their future.
Yeah. And definitely when they have criminal records, you can't even begin to imagine what their future will look like. Lerato, thank you so much for that. And I do hope parents have really taken extra precaution, as you say, that having a smartphone is not a right, but it's a privilege. And it is something that parents really need to think about. Thank you so much for that. That was social media legal consultant, Lerato Ntwampe.